Dear friends, welcome to yet another installment of Strategic Power. In this video, we will see how Sweden is becoming the 32nd member of NATO, expanding the Western military alliance against Russia. Even with Putin advancing in Ukraine, his attempt to contain NATO did not work. With Europe seeing Russia as a growing threat, military spending is breaking records. But will NATO be able to stop Russian expansion? Today, the Hungarian parliament gave the green light for Sweden's entry into NATO, the famous North Atlantic Treaty. This vote in a country led by Viktor Orban was the last obstacle to the expansion of the Western military alliance in the face of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Membership was approved by the Hungarian parliament in Budapest, with 188 votes in favour, 6 votes against, and no abstentions. Sweden showed interest in joining NATO because of the conflict in Ukraine, and is now about to become the 32nd member of the organisation. For the new member to be accepted, it is necessary for all member countries to approve its entry through votes in their legislatures. Last year, NATO had already expanded with the entry of Finland, which is also concerned about Putin's advances in Europe. When we address strategic studies, which focus on the analysis of armed conflicts, we explore 3 main dimensions: tactical, strategic, and political. In this specific case, we are dealing with the political dimension. The declared goal by Putin with this war in Ukraine was to stop NATO's expansion. However, he ended up achieving the opposite, with NATO expanding. Finland's land border with Russia is 1,340 kilometers. With Sweden's accession to NATO, the alliance will control 92% of the Baltic Sea, leaving only 2 small areas of free access for Russia: the entrance to St. Petersburg, the second largest Russian city after Moscow, and Kaliningrad, which is an exclave. Therefore, although Russia is achieving tactical and strategic advances in certain areas, such as Avdiivka, a strategic city only 15 kilometers from Donetsk, which could be used by Ukraine to reach Russian-occupied Donetsk since 2014, politically this represents a defeat for Putin and for Russia. It is important to remember that war is essentially a political event, as observed by Clausewitz. Thus, at this point, a political defeat for Putin is evident. Europe has just approved a $50 billion package to effectively support Ukraine in the war. In addition, it is progressing towards the goal of manufacturing between 1.5 and 2 million ammunition units to help the country. The Czech Republic and Denmark decided to donate all their artillery ammunition to Ukraine. Although it is not NATO directly, they are member countries of the organization that are leading this effort. They are more involved now than ever, especially because they feel they can no longer rely on the United States. A pro-Trump minority of congressmen is blocking approval of $60 billion in aid to Ukraine. In addition, there are concerns about Donald Trump's commitment to the mutual defense agreements established by NATO with Europe. This situation is intensifying the sense of need for self-defense in Europe, an old dilemma. This year, the number of NATO member countries reaching the goal of investing 2% of GDP in defense is expected to jump from 11 to 18. For the first time, when we add up the GDPs and investments of the 31 member countries, including Sweden, we reach 2% of the total. Although this may not be enough to contain Russian expansionism, it represents a significant advance from the past, when only 3 countries reached that goal. With his statements and positions, Trump is generating a sense of urgency in Europe to protect itself from Russia, something that was not so evident before. One of the outcomes of the war in Ukraine is the increase in Europe's military power. In 2020, Sweden invested 1% of its GDP in defense, but now that number has risen to 1.3%, and this year it will reach 2% with its entry into NATO. With Sweden's accession, there would already be 19 out of the 32 alliance member countries. Finland was the 31st country to join NATO. This increase in military spending reflects one of the legacies of that war. We are witnessing the highest level of military spending since 1945, totaling $2.2 trillion worldwide, largely due to NATO spending, which currently sees Russia as an existential threat. UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron compared the current situation to the period leading up to World War II. He recalled how Chamberlain, then British Prime Minister, and the French President yielded to Hitler's demands, granting him the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia in September 1938. At that time, they returned celebrating a piece of paper signed by Hitler. 6 months later, Hitler invaded Western Czechoslovakia and later divided Poland with Stalin, thus triggering World War II. The prevailing view in Europe today is that Putin will not stop in Ukraine, something his repeated statements also suggest. Putin's expansionist intent is evident in the occupied areas in Georgia, such as South Ossetia and Abkhazia, as well as in Transnistria. There is a statement from Germany suggesting that Russia could be planning to overrun the Suwalki corridor in 2025, connecting Belarus with Kaliningrad, which would constitute a direct attack on NATO territory on the border between Lithuania and Poland. In this regard, French President Macron mentioned today the possibility of sending troops to help Ukraine. He spoke of strategic ambiguity without going into details, but the message is clear. Europe sees Russia as an existential threat at this time, comparing Putin's actions to Hitler's moves prior to World War II. So why has all this military mobilization in Europe so far not been enough to contain Russia? The first point is that Europe is not directly involved in the fighting within Ukraine. It is providing armaments, as is the United States, but is not covering all of Ukraine's armament needs. In addition, Russia maintains air superiority, which requires Ukraine to have sophisticated fighter jets to confront Russia's latest generation fighter jets, as well as a large amount of ammunition. Another challenge is the issue of human resources. Russia has a larger reservoir of men and is more willing to employ them, including foreigners who are recruited and paid to participate, such as Indians, Nepalese, and people from Central Asia, while Ukraine, as a smaller country, faces limitations in that regard. These factors make, but do not render impossible, a Ukrainian victory. In the face of growing confrontation between Russia and Europe, the geopolitical scenario becomes increasingly tense and unpredictable. As NATO steps up efforts to contain Russian expansion, Ukraine faces a monumental challenge with partial and limited support from the West. The lingering question is, how far can this escalation of tensions take us? Are we on the brink of a new Cold War, or are we about to witness something even more sinister? Share your opinion in the comments below.